The room was dim, the fluorescent lights above flickering faintly as a thin hum of air conditioning fought against the desert heat seeping through the walls. A large map spread across the table, edges curling slightly, marked with red circles and coordinates that none of the SEALs would forget. Outside, the sun had just dipped beneath the jagged mountains, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and crimson, though inside, the atmosphere was far from tranquil. The air was thick with anticipation, nerves, and the subtle tension that comes only before a mission where every decision could mean life or death. Lieutenant Commander Jason Hawk Mercer stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed, scanning the faces of his team. Years of training had taught him to read every flicker of unease in his men's eyes. He didn't need them to speak. Their subtle shifts, the way their hands brushed against the edge of the table, the tightening of their jaws, all told him more than words could. Tonight's mission was straightforward on paper but riddled with variables. Enemy intelligence indicated a small but heavily armed hostile force had captured sensitive materials in a remote desert facility. The SEALs' task: retrieve the materials, neutralize threats, and be ready for immediate extraction. Simple in theory, impossible in execution. "Hawk, what about the extraction team?" asked Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniel Dock, his voice low, tinged with curiosity. His eyes narrowed, scanning the map, tracing the path they would take. "Are we looking at the usual crew?" Hawk's gaze didn't falter. "Extraction is a go. Helicopter ETA 200 hours. No surprises, they'll be on time. All we need to do is hold our position until they arrive. Quick in, quick out." There was a subtle murmur among the men. They nodded in acknowledgement, though a few glanced at one another with raised eyebrows. Something about Hawk's tone didn't sit right, too confident, too rehearsed. And yet, the mission's brevity left no room for second-guessing. Lives depended on absolute precision. Corporal Ranger leaned back slightly, rolling his shoulders, muscles coiled like springs. "And no word on the pilot?" he asked casually, but the question hung heavily in the air. The SEALs had trained with every type of pilot imaginable, but nothing prepared them for the unknown. Hawk's eyes flicked to the radio on the table, resting silently like an unspoken promise. "No details on the pilot," Hawk replied carefully. "Just that the extraction will be secure. Trust your training and your eyes on the ground. We go in, we complete the objective, we wait for extraction. That's it." The room fell silent, tension tightening with each passing second. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the thin blinds in the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a sandstorm churned, almost imperceptibly at first, kicking up dust and debris against the rocks. No one mentioned it. No one needed to. The desert could turn from calm to lethal in moments. Tonight, it would test them more than they knew. "Gear check," Hawk ordered, his voice slicing through the thick quiet. Each SEAL methodically inspected weapons, knives, grenades, and communication devices. Radios were synced, batteries checked, and backup batteries stored securely. Every piece of equipment mattered. One failure could mean disaster. The men moved efficiently, wordless in their routine, the rhythm honed over countless operations. Sweat glistened on foreheads. Even in the cool, air-conditioned room, tension, sparking an electric energy that flowed from one man to another. The youngest member, Petty Officer Samuel Bolt Turner, glanced nervously at Hawk. "Sir, should we expect resistance en route? Intel suggests the hostiles might have reinforcements." Hawk didn't flinch. "Expect it, assume nothing else. Our objective isn't confrontation unless necessary. Extraction is our priority. Remember your training. Stick to the plan, cover each other, move fast, trust in each other and in the extraction team." Bolt nodded, swallowing hard. There was a flicker of anxiety in his eyes, but also something else, a spark of excitement that only came when danger lurked, when the mission felt larger than life. Around the table, the other SEALs mirrored the sentiment. Fear was present, but it was channeled into focus. They thrived under pressure. That was why they were here. That was why they were the best. Hawk tapped a pen against the table. Coordinates here, he said, pointing to a point on the map surrounded by hostile indicators. This is your drop zone. Terrain is rough, rocky, and open in areas. Watch for ambush points, ridge lines, small cliffs, and vegetation where movement can't be easily detected. It's a desert, which means heat, sand, and visibility issues. Comms may fail. Storms are unpredictable. Consider this your reality. Adapt. Doc tilted his head, eyes narrowing. An extraction timing. 200. The only thing you can count on is precision, Hawk said firmly. Be ready before we reach the coordinates. Minutes are seconds, seconds are lives. Remember that. The men packed their gear into heavy-duty cases, double-checked ammunition, and adjusted the weight of their packs. Outside, the last rays of sun faded, leaving a cold, star-studded night. The desert seemed vast, infinite, silent. Yet beneath that silence, a storm of danger waited, a test of skill and nerve that would push every one of them to the edge. Hawk gave one final glance at the team, his expression unreadable. Stay sharp, trust your instincts, wait for extraction, and remember, hold together. That's all you can do. As the SEALs moved toward the waiting helicopters, engines idling in the distance, no one spoke. Their training had kicked in, words were unnecessary. Each man carried the weight of the mission, their packs heavy but their focus heavier. In the back of Hawk's mind, a quiet thought lingered. Tonight, things might not go as planned. Someone above, unseen, would need to guide them through the chaos ahead. Seconds later, the desert wind whispered against their helmets, and the first hints of a storm stirred in the distance. The helicopters cut through the night sky, their rotors chopping the air like blades, kicking up clouds of sand that shimmered under the moonlight. The SEALs crouched low, harnessed tightly inside, eyes scanning the darkness below. Their destination was a stretch of desert marked on the map, remote and unforgiving, where intelligence had reported a hostile encampment. Every man's heart thumped in sync with the machine's rhythm, nerves taut, muscles coiled. The youngest, Bolt, wiped sweat from his brow, though the air inside the helicopter was cool. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sand and metal, a warning of what lay ahead. Lieutenant Commander Hawk Mercer leaned forward, whispering over the intercom, "Coordinates in 10. Check your gear, check your bearings. Remember the plan, fast in, fast out. Eyes sharp, trust your team." His voice was steady, a calm anchor amid the hum of engines and the occasional clatter of gear. Around him, the SEALs moved silently, checking weapons, securing packs, and silently reviewing the objective in their minds. The desert below stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of jagged rocks, dunes, and shadows, each a potential threat. As the helicopters descended, the landing zone came into view, a narrow stretch between rocky ridges, illuminated only by the faint reflection of moonlight on sand and stone. The rotors whipped up dust, reducing visibility to a mere few feet. Hawk signaled with a hand gesture, and the SEALs themselves for insertion. One by one, they slid down the ropes, landing with controlled precision, feet gripping the uneven terrain. The youngest SEAL stumbled slightly, but Hawk's firm hand steadied him, a silent reminder that every man depended on the other. The desert was merciless. Sand shifted underfoot, sharp rocks threatened ankles, and the wind whispered warnings through the canyons. The team moved with practiced synchronization, eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow, every movement. Ranger led the rear, providing overwatch, his rifle trained on potential ambush points. Doc followed closely, ready to tend any injury in seconds. Hawk kept his mind focused on the mission and the extraction window, though a gnawing unease settled in his chest. Something about this night felt heavier, more dangerous than usual. They had traveled barely half a mile when the first signs of resistance appeared. A faint shimmer against the rocky terrain, a reflection, almost imperceptible, caught Hawk's eye. He froze, signaling a halt. The team dropped to the ground, rifles raised, scanning for threats. A sudden burst of gunfire erupted from a ridge ahead, bullets whizzing past with lethal precision. Sand sprayed across the rocks as the SEALs returned fire, their training turning instinct into movement. They were calm, precise, each shot calculated, each movement rehearsed countless times in training. Still, The knowledge that lives hung by the slimmest thread made every second stretch impossibly long. Bolt cursed under his breath as he ducked behind a boulder, narrowly avoiding a tracer round. This was supposed to be routine, he muttered, though his voice held no fear, only focus. Hawk's eyes scanned the canyon walls, searching for every detail, the enemy's numbers, positions, and any potential paths for extraction. The team had expected resistance, but the ambush tested every skill they had. The terrain favored their opponents, the ridges offering concealment. Yet the SEALs were unyielding, disciplined, moving methodically to suppress fire while assessing the route ahead. In the chaos, one SEAL slipped, twisting his ankle on a sharp rock. Doc moved quickly, offering support and applying a temporary brace. "Keep moving," Hawk instructed, his voice low but firm. "Every second counts, extraction won't wait." The team pressed on, adjusting their pace, silently acknowledging the danger. They were professionals, yet every man felt the weight of reality. A misstep could be fatal. The desert around them seemed endless, each dune and ridge hiding potential threats. The wind carried whispers, the storm in the distance growing stronger, almost as if it were aware of their mission. Radio static crackled, faint and unreliable. Hawk attempted a quick check-in, but the desert's interference distorted every transmission. The extraction team above was somewhere, but unreachable for now. The SEALs relied on training, instincts, and each other. Hawk signaled, and the team split into pairs, covering more ground while maintaining visual contact. Shadows danced in the moonlight as bullets occasionally pinged off rocks, forcing the men to remain alert. Every movement was deliberate, every decision a balance between speed and safety. The mission demanded precision, the desert demanded respect. They reached a narrow pass, the only route to their objective, when another burst of fire erupted from above. The SEALs ducked instinctively, returning fire with controlled bursts. Rangers' sharp eyes caught a glint, a sniper positioned high on a ridge. Hawk assessed the situation rapidly, formulating a plan. "Suppress and move," he ordered. The team obeyed without hesitation, laying down covering fire as Hawk led Bolt and Doc toward safer ground. Minutes felt like hours. Each second held potential death, but the SEALs moved with the calm efficiency of men trained for this exact scenario. As they advanced, the storm's first gusts reached them, sand whipping into their faces, stinging eyes and coating gear. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The mission had shifted from tactical precision to survival. Hawk pressed forward, counting silently. They were halfway to the target, but every step demanded focus, teamwork, and trust. Somewhere above, the extraction team monitored from the sky, preparing for the moment their expertise would be the difference between life and death. For now, the SEALs were alone, moving silently through a desert that threatened to swallow them whole. And then, just as tension threatened to crack nerves, a faint hum in the distance hinted at hope, the distant echo of rotors cutting through wind and sand. Hawk's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Could it be the extraction team? Every muscle tensed, every sense heightened. The SEALs pressed forward, cautiously optimistic yet wary. The desert offered no mercy, no second chances. Every moment, every breath brought them closer to either success or disaster. The mission was alive, the danger immediate, and the team fully aware that the night had only begun. The SEALs moved cautiously through the narrow canyon, the moonlight casting long shadows over jagged rocks. The air was thick with sand, the wind howling like a living entity, carrying whispers of danger that made every man tense. Ahead, the coordinates marked the target, a small, fortified compound barely visible but unmistakably hostile. Hawk signaled for the team to halt, lowering himself behind a boulder. His eyes scanned every ridge, every crag, every shadow that could conceal an enemy. Tonight, the desert was no longer a silent expanse. It had become a hunting ground, and they were the prey. Suddenly, the first shots rang out, sharp and precise. Bullets shredded sand around the SEALs, forcing them to dive for cover. The enemy had been waiting, hidden on high ground, their positions well chosen and deadly. Hawk assessed the situation, heart pounding, mind calculating every possible move. "Suppressing fire," he barked, and the team responded instantly, rifles spitting controlled bursts into the darkness. The echoes bounced off rocks, a deadly symphony as tracer rounds cut through the night. Every movement was measured, every action calculated to keep the men alive. Bolt's pulse raced as he returned fire, adrenaline surging. "They're everywhere," he shouted over the cacophony of gunfire. Hawk's eyes didn't waver. He spotted a sniper nest atop a ridge and directed Ranger to provide covering fire. The SEALs had trained for ambushes, but this was more intense than any exercise. The enemy had numbers, position, and the advantage of terrain. The SEALs had skill, discipline, and a mission that could not fail. Survival depended on split-second decisions, trust in each other, and nerves of steel. A grenade exploded nearby, sending shards of rock and sand into the air. Doc shielded Bolt instinctively, and Hawk assessed injuries quickly. One SEAL had a grazing wound on his arm, nothing critical, but enough to slow him down. Hawk adjusted the team's formation, moving them in a tight, defensive pattern. The enemy pressed hard, but the SEALs held their ground, retreating only strategically to maintain cover while keeping eyes on the extraction window. Time was their enemy now, every second pushing them closer to exhaustion. The narrow canyon amplified every sound, shouts, gunfire, and the distant thrum of helicopter blades above. Hawk knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Comms were crackling with static. The extraction team might be delayed, their arrival uncertain. He signaled Bolt and Ranger, guiding them toward a ridge that offered a better line of sight and temporary safety. Each step was calculated, sand shifting beneath boots, rocks threatening ankles. The desert was unforgiving, the night unrelenting. Survival depended on skill, courage, and a touch of luck that only the trained could count on. Suddenly, Hawk's radio sputtered, barely audible over the storm of bullets. He adjusted the volume, straining to hear. The voice that came through was calm, measured, and unexpectedly female. "Hold on, SEALs," it said, cutting through the chaos like a beacon of clarity. The team froze for a heartbeat, stunned. A female pilot. None of them had anticipated this. The voice was confident, commanding, and immediately infused the men with a spark of hope. Hawk's heart rate slowed slightly, not out of safety but out of relief. The nightmare had a lifeline, and it was already speaking. Pilot's instructions were precise. "Move to your left behind the ridge. I'll cover your six and coordinate extraction. Hold formation. Don't engage beyond suppressing fire until you reach the pickup point." Hawk signaled his team, and they moved as instructed, ducking behind rocks, bullets kicking sand around them. Every man obeyed instinctively, trusting the calm authority of a voice they had never met. The desert's hostility remained unchanged, but their strategy had shifted. Now they were not alone. Someone was above, watching, calculating, guiding. The enemy intensified their assault, sensing the SEALs repositioning. Hawk ordered controlled bursts, suppressing fire while keeping their movement precise. Ranger's keen eyes picked off threats from higher ground, while Doc kept a watchful eye on injuries, ready to act at a moment's notice. Every SEAL relied on training honed through years of exercises, drills, and missions. Yet tonight, training alone was not enough. Each heartbeat, each decision, could be the difference between life and death. The female pilot above was already altering the outcome with every word, her presence transforming despair into calculated hope. Minutes felt like hours as the SEALs navigated the treacherous terrain, the enemy relentless. Hawk's mind raced, calculating extraction coordinates and predicting the pilot's approach. The wind howled harder, carrying sand like tiny blades against faces and arms. Every man's focus was razor-sharp. Hesitation could be fatal. The desert's vastness seemed to close in, turning every rock into a potential threat, every shadow into an enemy. Yet despite the chaos, the SEALs pressed forward, disciplined and unyielding, their movements synchronized as though choreographed. And then above the roar of wind and gunfire, the distant whine of rotors became audible, faint but unmistakable. Hawk's eyes darted skyward, and for the first time tonight a glimmer of relief washed over him. The female pilot was on her way, slicing through sand and darkness, her skill evident even in the distant hum. "Hold on," she repeated, her voice steady, calm, unshakable. The SEALs adjusted their pace. following her instructions, moving as a single unit, guided by the confidence of a stranger whose courage matched their own. The ambush had tested them in every conceivable way: terrain, enemy fire, weather, but now hope had arrived. The extraction was no longer a distant possibility, it was imminent. Hawk's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing on the ridge ahead. They had survived the initial onslaught, navigated chaos, and now, under the guidance of the unseen pilot, they were preparing for the final, most dangerous stretch. Every SEAL moved with renewed purpose, ready to face whatever the desert, the enemy, or the night had left in store. Static in the canyon crackled, cutting through the whistling wind and gunfire like shards of ice. Then a voice emerged, calm and precise, slicing through the chaos. "Hold on, SEALs." Hawk froze for a heartbeat, eyes scanning his team. The voice was unmistakably female, commanding, unwavering, and confident. Each man processed it differently: shock, disbelief, relief, but all understood the implications immediately. They had a lifeline, someone guiding them through the storm. The enemy didn't know she was coming. Neither did the SEALs, at least until now. The desert had just shifted from battlefield to controlled chaos, and hope had arrived. "Move to the ridge on your left," the voice continued. "Suppress fire only and stay low. I'll coordinate your extraction and provide cover. Keep formation tight, don't break line." Hawk signaled his team with hand gestures, each motion precise, rehearsed. Bullets zipped past, embedding themselves in rocks around them, yet the calm authority of the pilot kept their fear at bay. She spoke with the rhythm of someone who had done this countless times, every word measured, every command practical. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only absolute competence. For the first time that night, the SEALs felt they had an advantage. Rangers' rifles spat fire toward the ridge ahead, suppressing enemy positions as Hawk led the team in a careful, deliberate maneuver. Every step was calculated, every glance measured. The team's trust in her voice grew with each instruction. She wasn't merely guiding them, she was orchestrating their survival. Even in the face of chaos, the wind, the sand, the bullets, they followed without question. The desert, which had seemed endless and merciless, became a map of calculated movement, dictated by the unseen hand above. Hawk had seen many extraction teams, but none like this. None that instilled such instant, unshakable confidence. The SEALs paused behind a boulder to assess the next move. "She's guiding us like a conductor," Bolt muttered, adjusting his grip on his rifle. "Unreal." Hawk allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod. Words were useless now, actions spoke louder. They moved as one unit, suppressing enemy fire while maintaining a fluid, defensive formation. Every bullet returned was precise, controlled. The enemy was formidable, well-positioned, and relentless, but the SEALs had been trained for ambushes. Now, with guidance from someone who had clearly mastered the skis, they were operating at a level beyond routine training. The pilot's voice cut back through the static, calm and focused. 200 meters to extraction point. Keep left, stay low. I have eyes on all hostile positions. Cover each other. Move fast but steady." Hawk felt the weight of the words. They were not suggestions, they were commands designed to keep them alive. Every member of the team absorbed them instinctively, trusting the pilot without hesitation. Each step became a rhythm, every breath synchronized with movement, every glance part of a larger plan. Fear existed, but it was tempered by competence. Hope had a name, a voice, and it was guiding them. Sand stung faces, whipped into eyes by the wind, and the storm's howl grew louder. Enemy fire continued, sporadic but deadly, forcing constant movement and recalculated positions. Hawk directed his men according to the pilot's instructions, glancing toward the ridge she had mentioned. Tracer rounds illuminated the canyon, a deadly fireworks display that highlighted the danger. Doc moved close to Bolt, monitoring the younger SEAL's slight stumble from fatigue. Hawk adjusted their path, signaling them into better cover. The team's coordination, combined with her guidance, created a flow of action that made survival feel possible even amidst chaos. Seconds stretched, each one carrying the weight of potential disaster. The pilot's calm tone was the counterbalance to the chaos surrounding them. "Suppress and advance," she instructed again, almost as if she were inside the canyon with them. Hawk's heart rate stabilized despite the bullets that ricocheted around him. The team's trust was absolute now. Every SEAL moved with precision, following the plan she dictated. The desert had become a dangerous chessboard, each move critical, each decision life-saving. Yet for the first time, they were not alone. Someone else had the bigger picture, and that knowledge was a weapon. Then the sound above grew louder, the unmistakable whine of helicopter blades, cutting through the storm and the night. Hawk glanced skyward, spotting the faint outline of rotors illuminated by the moonlight filtering through clouds. She was there, and she had them in her sights. Every member of the team felt a surge of adrenaline. The extraction wasn't distant. It was arriving at the precise moment it was needed most. Hawk tightened his grip on his rifle, signaling the final approach to the extraction point. The pilot's voice remained calm, guiding, and precise, her competence evident in every word. The SEALs pressed forward, moving as one unit, bullets still pinging off rocks nearby. Hawk led them over a small rise, eyes scanning the area, ready to adjust at a moment's notice. Each SEAL relied not just on their training, but on the guidance that had turned a desperate situation into a manageable one. They had faced ambushes before, storms before, hostile fire before, but never with a lifeline like this. The female pilot above had become more than support. She had become the difference between life and death. Each man silently acknowledged it as they advanced toward the extraction point. Finally, as the helicopter descended closer, dust and sand swirling violently in the night, Hawk allowed a brief moment of relief. They were alive. They were still breathing, and they were about to be lifted from a battlefield that could have ended them all. The female pilot's voice echoed once more through the radio, calm, commanding, confident. "Hold on, SEALs. I've got you." Hawk's team didn't need more words. They moved together, every man aware of the danger, every man trusting in her guidance. The desert had tested them, the enemy had challenged them, and the storm had tried to break them. But under the watchful direction of an unseen, skilled pilot, they were still in control. Tonight, survival was no longer a gamble. It was orchestrated. And at the center of that orchestration was a voice, calm and unyielding, cutting through chaos with the certainty of skill. The desert had transformed into a living threat. Sand whipped into the SEALs' faces, stinging eyes and coating rifles with fine grit. The wind roared through the canyon, carrying the sharp, distant crack of enemy gunfire. Hawk Mercer led the team forward, muscles coiled, senses stretched to their absolute limits. The female pilot's voice crackled through the radio again, calm, precise, unwavering. 200 meters to extraction. Keep low, maintain formation. I've got eyes on all hostile positions. Move fast but steady. Hawk nodded, signaling the team with hand gestures learned through years of silent communication. Every man moved like a shadow, careful yet urgent. The helicopter's distant hum became louder, though the storm and terrain distorted its approach. The SEALs' mission had shifted, no longer solely about securing the objective, but now also about surviving the deadly race to extraction. Every step carried potential death, every second was precious. The pilot's guidance turned panic into precise movement, fear into coordinated action. Bolt glanced at Hawk, eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. "She's unreal," he muttered under his breath. Hawk's only reply was a firm nod. There was no time for words, only action. The terrain was merciless. Jagged rocks and steep ridges forced the team to navigate cautiously, yet the enemy pressed relentlessly. Tracer rounds lit the night sky, ricocheting off boulders and sand, creating a deadly strobe of red and orange. Ranger led the rear, covering every step, eyes scanning high and low. Doc kept an eye on each team member, ready to address injuries that might occur at any moment. Every SEAL understood the stakes. One misstep, one hesitation, and extraction could become impossible. Trusting the pilot's voice was now as vital as watching the enemy. The SEALs adjusted their pace, moving in unison. Hawk signaled a shift in formation, using every ounce of training and instinct to keep the team alive. The female pilot's calm instructions guided their path, left, low, cover fire only. It was a delicate dance. Bullets were everywhere, the storm made vision near impossible, and the extraction point was just over the next ridge. Hawk's pulse hammered, muscles tense, yet his movements remained controlled. The difference between chaos and survival was measured in meters and seconds. Sand tore across their faces, infiltrating every crevice of clothing and gear. Hawk's mind calculated distances, enemy positions, and the timing of the helicopter's approach. Every SEAL pressed on, despite exhaustion, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of their consciousness. Hawk signaled Bolt and Ranger to flank a ridge, suppressing sniper fire that threatened to slow their advance. Each SEAL moved instinctively, their training amplified by the pilot's guidance from above. The desert storm no longer felt random. It was part of the trial, a force they had to master to survive. The distant whine of rotors grew louder, each beat a pulse of hope. Hawk could see shadows of movement above, though the storm distorted vision and sound. The pilot maneuvered with precision, her skill evident even from hundreds of feet below. Her instructions continued: cover your 6, keep low. I see hostile positions, avoid direct engagement unless necessary. Extraction is in sight 20 meters left. Move fast but controlled. Hawk's jaw tightened. Every SEAL obeyed without hesitation, the rhythm of their movements syncing with the cadence of her voice. They had never trusted anyone so completely, yet instinctively they knew they could. Suddenly, a volley of bullets struck close, sending sand and debris into the air. Hawk signaled immediate cover fire, suppressing the enemy as the team moved a few meters closer to the ridge. Bolt's breath came fast, but his eyes were sharp. Almost there, Hawk muttered. Each SEAL moved with deliberate urgency, muscles screaming in protest but heart steady. Every second felt stretched, elongated by adrenaline. The desert had become a gauntlet, every ridge, dune, and boulder a potential threat. Yet the pilot above transformed fear into calculated action, her voice a lifeline threading through chaos. The extraction point emerged, a narrow clearing surrounded by rocks, illuminated by the moon and obscured partially by the storm. Hawk's team dropped behind the nearest cover, suppressing enemy fire while signaling the pilot for landing clearance. Clear for pickup in 30 seconds, the pilot's voice came, calm and commanding. Hawk breathed in, then out, signaling the SEALs to tighten formation. Every movement had been planned and executed in the previous tense minutes, and now the final stretch demanded precision. Any error could ruin everything. Enemy fire intensified, sensing their approach. Hawk barked rapid instructions, adjusting angles and positioning while ensuring the team remained low and coordinated. Ranger covered the left flank, bolts of gunfire deflecting off rocks and sand. Doc crouched over Bolt, brushing grit from his eyes while whispering encouragement. The SEALs pressed forward, using every ounce of discipline, training, and sheer will to navigate the last few meters. Hawk's mind raced, timing, terrain, extraction. Every factor had to align perfectly. And above, the pilot's calm, measured commands orchestrated their survival like a symphony of precision and trust. Then finally, the distant rotor blades became visible through the storm's haze. The female pilot guided the helicopter low, dodging debris and enemy fire with skill that left no margin for error. Hawk signaled his team forward, their pace synchronized with her descent. Bullets continued to strike nearby, ricocheting off rocks and kicking up clouds of sand, but the SEALs moved as one, disciplined, focused, unstoppable. Hope surged with each step closer to extraction, tempered only by the awareness of how fragile life could be in this moment. As Hawk reached the edge of the clearing, his eyes locked on the approaching helicopter. Every man followed, adrenaline and determination fused into a singular drive, survival. The pilot's voice guided them one final time. Hold formation, stay low, extraction is now. You're almost there. The team moved, synchronized, precise. The storm, the enemy, the desert, all seemed to pause in that critical instant. And in that pause, they realized that they were not merely surviving. They were being led by someone whose skill and courage had turned near-certain death into hope. The desert had transformed into a living threat. Sand whipped into the SEALs' faces, stinging eyes and coating rifles with fine grit. The wind roared through the canyon, carrying the sharp, distant crack of enemy gunfire. Hawk Mercer led the team forward, muscles coiled, senses stretched to their absolute limits. The female pilot's voice crackled through the radio again, calm, precise, unwavering. 200 meters to extraction. Keep low, maintain formation. I've got eyes on all hostile positions. Move fast but steady. Hawk nodded, signaling the team with hand gestures learned through years of silent communication. Every man moved like a shadow, careful yet urgent. The helicopter's distant hum became louder, though the storm and terrain distorted its approach. The SEALs' mission had shifted, no longer solely about securing the objective, but now also about surviving the deadly race to extraction. Every step carried potential death, every second was precious. The pilot's guidance turned panic into precise movement, fear into coordinated action. Bolt glanced at Hawk, eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. "She's unreal," he muttered under his breath. Hawk's only reply was a firm nod. There was no time for words, only action. The terrain was merciless. Jagged rocks and steep ridges forced the team to navigate cautiously, yet the enemy pressed relentlessly. Tracer rounds lit the night sky, ricocheting off boulders and sand, creating a deadly strobe of red and orange. Ranger led the rear, covering every step, eyes scanning high and low. Doc kept an eye on each team member, ready to address injuries that might occur at any moment. Every SEAL understood the stakes. One misstep, one hesitation, and extraction could become impossible. Trusting the pilot's voice was now as vital as watching the enemy. The SEALs adjusted their pace, moving in unison. Hawk signaled a shift in formation, using every ounce of training and instinct to keep the team alive. The female pilot's calm instructions guided their path: left, low, cover fire only. It was a delicate dance. Bullets were everywhere, the storm made vision near impossible, and the extraction point was just over the next ridge. Hawk's pulse hammered, muscles tense, yet his movements remained controlled. The difference between chaos and survival was measured in meters and seconds. Sand tore across their faces, infiltrating every crevice of clothing and gear. Hawk's mind calculated distances, enemy positions, and the timing of the helicopter's approach. Every SEAL pressed on, despite exhaustion, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of their consciousness. Hawk signaled Bolt and Ranger to flank a ridge, suppressing sniper fire that threatened to slow their advance. Each SEAL moved instinctively, their training amplified by the pilot's guidance from above. The desert storm no longer felt random. It was part of the trial, a force they had to master to survive. The distant whine of rotors grew louder, each beat a pulse of hope. Hawk could see shadows of movement above, though the storm distorted vision and sound. The pilot maneuvered with precision, her skill evident even from hundreds of feet below. Her instructions continued: cover your six, keep low. I see hostile positions, avoid direct engagement unless necessary. Extraction is in sight 20 meters left. Move fast but controlled. Hawk's jaw tightened. Every SEAL obeyed without hesitation, the rhythm of their movements syncing with the cadence of her voice. They had never trusted anyone so completely, yet instinctively they knew they could. Suddenly, a volley of bullets struck close, sending sand and debris into the air. Hawk signaled immediate cover fire, suppressing the enemy as the team moved a few meters closer to the ridge. Bolt's breath came fast, but his eyes were sharp. Almost there, Hawk muttered. Each SEAL moved with deliberate urgency, muscles screaming in protest but hearts steady. Every second felt stretched, elongated by adrenaline. The desert had become a gauntlet, every ridge, dune, and boulder a potential threat. Yet the pilot above transformed fear into calculated action, her voice a lifeline threading through chaos. The extraction point emerged, a narrow clearing surrounded by rocks, illuminated by the moon and obscured partially by the storm. Hawk's team dropped behind the nearest cover, suppressing enemy fire while signaling the pilot for landing clearance. Clear for pickup in 30 seconds, the pilot's voice came, calm and commanding. Hawk breathed in, then out, signaling the SEALs to tighten formation. Every movement had been planned and executed in the previous tense minutes, and now the final stretch demanded precision. Any error could ruin everything. Enemy fire intensified, sensing their approach. Hawk barked rapid instructions, adjusting angles and positioning while ensuring the team remained low and coordinated. Ranger covered the left flank, bolts of gunfire deflecting off rocks and sand. Doc crouched over Bolt, brushing grit from his eyes while whispering encouragement. The SEALs pressed forward, using every ounce of discipline, training, and sheer will to navigate the last few meters. Hawk's mind raced, timing, terrain, extraction. Every factor had to align perfectly. And above, the pilot's calm, measured commands orchestrated their survival like a symphony of precision and trust. Then finally, the distant rotor blades became visible through the storm's haze. The female pilot guided the helicopter low, dodging debris and enemy fire with skill that left no margin for error. Hawk signaled his team forward, their pace synchronized with her descent. Bullets continued to strike nearby, ricocheting off rocks and kicking up clouds of sand, but the SEALs moved as one, disciplined, focused, unstoppable. Hope surged with each step closer to extraction, tempered only by the awareness of how fragile life could be in this moment. As Hawk reached the edge of the clearing, his eyes locked on the approaching helicopter. Every man followed, adrenaline and determination fused into a singular drive, survival. The pilot's voice guided them one final time. Hold formation, stay low, extraction is now. You're almost there. The team moved, synchronized, precise. The storm, the enemy, the desert, all seemed to pause in that critical instant. And in that pause, they realized that they were not merely surviving. They were being led by someone whose skill and courage had turned near-certain death into hope. The clearing loomed ahead like a beacon through the chaos, a narrow stretch of rocky terrain barely large enough for a helicopter to land. Hawk Mercer's team moved with every muscle coiled, weapons trained, eyes sharp, hearts pounding. Above, the female pilot maneuvered the aircraft with astonishing precision, slicing through the desert storm as if the wind were nothing more than a ribbon she could bend. Her calm, commanding voice guided each move, her instructions cutting through the roar of engines, bullets, and wind. Hold formation, cover your six, boarding in 30 seconds, stay low, don't rush. Each SEAL obeyed instinctively, their trust absolute. Sand whipped violently, striking faces and blinding eyes. Hawk signaled the team to spread slightly, suppressing enemy fire as they closed in on the extraction point. The hostile forces, realizing the SEALs were moments from evacuation, unleashed a furious barrage. Tracer rounds streaked through the storm like red-hot fingers, ricocheting off jagged rocks and embedding in the sand around them. The SEALs responded with controlled fire, each shot precise, each movement deliberate. They were trained for chaos, yet the storm and ambush together created a scenario more dangerous than any drill or prior mission. Survival depended on flawless execution and absolute trust in the unseen pilot above. Bolt dove behind a boulder, narrowly avoiding a tracer that hissed past his ear. "This is insane," he shouted, teeth gritted. Hawk's gaze didn't waver. Every man's focus was razor-sharp. Panic was a luxury they could not afford. The helicopter hovered lower now, its landing skids kicking up clouds of sand and debris. The female pilot's control was flawless, her maneuvers precise despite the wind, terrain, and enemy fire. Hawk silently acknowledged her skill. Her presence was not just reassuring, it was. She was the difference between life and death. Hawk signaled for the team to move into the clearing. Ranger led the left flank, providing covering fire to neutralize sniper positions on nearby ridges. Doc stayed close to Bolt, monitoring his fatigue and the minor abrasions that the storm and combat had inflicted. Every SEAL operated as a single, coordinated unit, executing commands with split-second timing. Each step toward the helicopter was a calculated risk. The enemy fire grew more desperate, closer, yet Hawk's confidence in the pilot's guidance allowed him to push forward. Time was collapsing into a few critical seconds. The helicopter descended, skimming rocks and sand, blades cutting the air in a furious blur. The storm distorted everything, the roar of engines, the crackle of gunfire, the whine of wind, but the pilot maintained control. Hawk watched as the extraction point, barely more than 20 meters across, became a stage for survival. "Move forward, go," her voice commanded over the radio. SEALs sprinted low, rifles raised, bullets pinging off nearby rocks. Each step demanded precision, courage, and discipline. One wrong move, and the helicopter's delicate landing could be compromised. The storm and enemy fire conspired, but her skill neutralized the chaos. Bolt stumbled, slipping in the sand, and Doc was there in an instant, steadying him. Hawk's eyes swept across the clearing, noting every obstacle and every threat. The enemy, realizing the imminent extraction, escalated their assault, firing indiscriminately into the clearing. Tracer rounds ricocheted dangerously close to the SEALs and helicopter skids. Hawk signaled rapid suppressive fire. Each SEAL responded, bullets erupting in controlled bursts, forcing the enemy to retreat slightly. The pilot adjusted the helicopter's descent, banking carefully to avoid the rocks while keeping the skids aligned with the narrow landing area. Precision, skill, and nerve dominated the moment. "Boarding now, move," the pilot called again, calm yet commanding. Hawk gestured and the SEALs leaped onto the skids, hands gripping tightly as they swung their legs inside. Ranger and Bolt provided covering fire as Hawk and Doc followed. The helicopter trembled under wind and sand, blades slicing the storm above. Hawk's eyes flicked back toward the desert. Every second counted, every movement could mean life or death. They climbed in, one by one, coordinated, disciplined, and relentless, the rhythm guided by the pilot's unwavering voice. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She simply executed. Enemy fire continued, a relentless backdrop of danger, but the SEALs were now aboard, weapons ready, adrenaline coursing. Hawk's eyes met hers through the cockpit's glass only briefly, yet enough to register recognition, skill, courage, authority, calm. She executed an impossible lift, rotors cutting through sand, evading rocks and bullets as if dancing with danger. The helicopter rose, skimming high enough to avoid immediate threats, yet low enough to remain unseen from distant enemy positions. Hawk allowed himself a fraction of relief. Every man alive, extraction in motion, danger not yet gone but mitigated. The desert stretched beneath them, a chaotic battlefield now behind them. Hawk assessed his team, minor scrapes, fatigue, adrenaline, but alive. Bolt wiped grit from his eyes, Ranger kept scanning the periphery, and Doc finally exhaled. The pilot's voice remained steady. "Hold formation. We're not out of the storm yet. Keep alert. Enemy fire has decreased but is not gone. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Hawk's heart pounded, not in fear but in respect. She had guided them through impossible odds, maneuvered through a storm, and executed extraction flawlessly. Without her, many would not have survived. As the helicopter cleared the canyon, leaving enemy fire and sand behind, Hawk allowed himself a brief glance back. The desert, illuminated by moonlight and punctuated by tracer rounds, seemed almost surreal now. They had survived an ambush, navigated impossible terrain, and withstood a sandstorm of epic proportions. The SEALs were exhausted but alive, their survival owed in no small part to the unseen hero above, the female pilot whose calm precision had dictated the pace, the safety, and ultimately the outcome. She was more than support. She was their lifeline, their guide, and their savior. Hawk's mind raced ahead, already calculating the safest path back to base. Yet for this moment he allowed himself the rare luxury of acknowledgement, a silent personal recognition of skill, courage, and nerves of steel. The SEALs in the back caught their breath, glances exchanged filled with relief and disbelief. They had been pushed to the edge, yet survived thanks to precise coordination, discipline, and an extraordinary pilot whose identity had been a revelation. The desert storm had not claimed them. She had. The desert stretched below like a vast, indifferent ocean, endless and unforgiving. The helicopter cut through the storm's remnants, blades slicing through wind and sand with precision that the chaotic night. Hawk Mercer pressed himself against the fuselage, rifle ready, scanning the horizon. But for the first time that night, there was a sense of relief, albeit cautious. Every SEAL aboard was alive, every man accounted for, and their extraction, which had once seemed a distant hope, was now a living, roaring reality. Yet danger lingered. Every second above the desert reminded them that even survival was never guaranteed. Bolt slumped against the side of the aircraft, exhaustion catching up to him. I can't believe it," he muttered, voice rough with sand and adrenaline. Hawk didn't respond. His eyes were fixed outside, tracing the jagged canyon below, calculating every potential threat. Ranger's gaze remained sharp, scanning for hostile fire even as the storm began to subside. Doc quietly checked over the SEALs for injuries, nodding with relief as minor scrapes and bruises were confirmed. They were alive, but only barely, and the memory of the ambush, bullets tearing through night, lingered with every heartbeat. Above them, the female pilot maneuvered the helicopter with breathtaking precision. The storm had not been kind, but she had danced through it with the calm assurance of someone who understood every nuance of the aircraft and the battlefield below. Hawk caught glimpses of her hands on the controls, eyes unwavering, voice still coming through the radio. "Enemy fire has decreased. Maintain low altitude. I've plotted a safe corridor back to base. Keep alert. Stay prepared for evasive maneuvers." Her tone was calm, almost casual, but every word carried the weight of life-and-death authority. Hawk allowed himself a flicker of admiration. It was not just skill, it was mastery. The desert below became a patchwork of shadows and dunes, illuminated occasionally by lightning flashes from a distant storm. Each pulse of light reminded the SEALs of how close they had come to disaster. Hawk scanned their positions, signaling subtle adjustments to maintain balance and safety aboard the aircraft. The female pilot banked carefully, avoiding ridges and protruding rocks, the rotors barely clearing obstacles by mere feet. Even in the face of exhaustion and the remnants of the ambush, every SEAL felt a strange calm settle over them, anchored by her voice and presence. Minutes stretched into tense hours as the helicopter navigated the desert. Hawk allowed himself a moment to reflect, as did the others in silence. Every step of the mission, from insertion to ambush to extraction, had demanded every ounce of their skill and endurance. Yet, above all, it had demanded trust. Trust in each other, in training, and now, in the female pilot guiding them through chaos. They had learned quickly that hope could manifest in unexpected forms, in a calm, commanding voice that dictated every move, every maneuver, every heartbeat. Bolt finally spoke again, voice still shaky. She saved us, all of us." Hawk's gaze softened, but he didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. Actions had proven her worth more than any verbal praise ever could. Ranger, scanning the horizon, nodded subtly, acknowledging the same truth. Doc quietly secured equipment, his hands steady despite fatigue. The storm had tested them physically, mentally, and emotionally, but they had survived. And the pilot, whose identity remained largely a mystery, had been the difference between death and life. Above, the helicopter cleared the final ridge, the lights of the base twinkling in the distance like beacons of safety. Hawk felt a weight lift from his chest, though caution remained. The desert was still dangerous, still unpredictable, but the immediate threat had passed. Enemy fire had ceased, the storm's fury diminished, and the pilot continued her precise maneuvers toward the landing zone. Every SEAL aboard allowed themselves a brief breath, a momentary pause in the relentless tension that had defined the last few hours. They had been pushed to the edge and had survived. The female pilot's voice, calm and unwavering as ever, guided them into final landing position. "Touchdown in 30 seconds. Maintain formation. Weapons ready. Eyes sharp." Hawk gestured to the team, signaling readiness to disembark once on solid ground. Every SEAL prepared for the final step, knowing that while the helicopter had carried them safely this far, they would still need to remain alert until inside the fortified base. The storm, the ambush, and the desert had tested them, but they had endured, and she had ensured it. As the helicopter descended, Hawk caught a fleeting glimpse of her face, focused, composed, unflinching. There was no hint of hesitation, no trace of doubt. She had guided them through impossible odds, through sand, storm, and enemy fire, and had emerged victorious without a scratch. Hawk allowed himself a rare, personal acknowledgement. This was someone extraordinary, someone who had earned not just his respect, but the respect of every SEAL aboard. Lives had been saved through skill, courage, and composure that bordered on legendary. The landing was precise, the helicopter skimming the final rocks before settling on the base's tarmac. Hawk signaled the team to disembark, each SEAL moving methodically, still alert, still wary. The desert and storm had been left behind, but adrenaline and relief collided in equal measure. Each step towards solid ground felt monumental. Bolt's knees wobbled slightly, Ranger's eyes remained vigilant, and Doc checked the team one last time for injuries. Hawk stayed back for a moment, glancing toward the cockpit. "Thank you," he whispered quietly, not needing a response. Her work had saved them all. As the SEALs regrouped on the base, catching their breath, the pilot stepped from the helicopter, calm, composed, and almost otherworldly in her presence. Hawk approached, extending a firm handshake. "Outstanding," he said, voice low, carrying more weight than praise ever could. She nodded slightly, dismissing accolades, her focus already shifting to the next mission. The SEALs exchanged glances, awe and gratitude written across their faces. Tonight, a female pilot had not only saved their lives, she had rewritten what they believed possible. Every man aboard would remember her skill, calm, and courage forever. The storm faded completely, leaving a calm, starry night above. Hawk allowed a rare smile, the first in hours. They had survived. Extraction had succeeded. Lives had been saved. And above all, the SEALs knew they owed everything to the voice that had guided them through the storm, through the ambush, and through the desert. A legend had been born tonight, not from heroics alone, but from precision, courage, and unshakable calm in the face of impossible odds. The base's lights shimmered against the clearing night sky, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Hawk Mercer led his team from the helicopter, every step measured, eyes still scanning for lingering threats. The desert, storm, and ambush were behind them, but the adrenaline still throbbed in their veins. Exhaustion weighed heavily on each SEAL, yet pride and relief battled fatigue. They were alive, every man accounted for, every life saved. And the reason for their survival, the calm, precise, fearless female pilot, stood quietly nearby, surveying the scene with practiced detachment, yet carrying the aura of someone who had just changed the course of the night. Bolt finally exhaled, shaking sand from his hair, his expression a mix of disbelief and awe. "I still can't believe she pulled that off," he muttered, voice husky. Hawk didn't respond immediately. Words were inadequate. The pilot had done more than fly. They had been guided, shielded, and orchestrated through an impossible storm and ambush. Her calm, commanding presence had dictated the survival of an elite SEAL team under circumstances that would have broken most seasoned operators. Hawk felt a mix of admiration and respect, emotions difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore. Ranger, always the sentinel, scanned the perimeter one last time before finally lowering his rifle. Even in relief, his eyes betrayed the mental processing of what had just occurred. Each member of the team silently acknowledged a truth they would not say aloud. Their survival owed to someone whose skill transcended ordinary training. Doc moved quietly through the group, checking minor injuries, offering water and assistance, but even he allowed himself to marvel at the sheer precision with which they had been guided. The pilot's actions had been flawless, her decisions unerring, her calm absolute. Hawk approached her, finally closing the distance. "Outstanding," he said, voice low, carrying the weight of unspoken acknowledgement. The pilot nodded slightly, her expression neutral yet composed, eyes already assessing their environment and the next steps. Hawk allowed himself a brief, rare smile. "You just saved all of us. That was incredible." She responded with a simple nod, refusing accolades, her focus unwavering. It was not heroism for recognition. It was heroism born of discipline, skill, and courage. and Hawk knew he would carry the memory of it for the rest of his life. The team regrouped in a secure hangar, exhaustion catching up to them. The storm outside had passed, leaving calm and clarity in its wake. Hawk took a moment to glance around at his men, Bolt, Ranger, Doc, all breathing, shaken yet alive. The pilot remained at the helicopter, checking instruments, her calm presence a counterbalance to the relief and fatigue swirling among the SEALs. For Hawk, the weight of leadership remained heavy, yet gratitude and respect surged now where fear and tension had dominated before. This mission had tested them beyond anything imagined, and the female pilot had not just met that test, she had mastered it. Debriefing began shortly after, officers and intelligence analysts poring over data, radar, and mission logs. Hawk led his team, recounting the details of insertion, ambush, and extraction. Every action, every maneuver, every split-second decision was documented, yet the most critical variable, the pilot, stood apart, silent but resolute. When the subject of her presence arose, the room collectively paused, recognizing the extraordinary nature of what had occurred. Hawk's words to command were clear, precise, and filled with awe. "Without her, we wouldn't have made it. She is extraordinary. Her skill saved lives." Bolt, finally regaining some composure, shook his head. "I've been in combat before. I've seen ambushes, storms, impossible terrain, but nothing like that. She was a lifeline, literally." Ranger placed a hand on his shoulder, nodding in agreement. Hawk, standing slightly apart, allowed a silent acknowledgement of truth. The pilot's calm, precision, and authority had transformed a situation that should have been catastrophic into a story of survival. She had rewritten the rules of what they thought possible, and the SEALs would not soon forget it. The pilot finally spoke, her voice calm, neutral, almost understated. "Mission complete. Extraction successful. Team accounted for. All hostile activity monitored and assessed." Hawk felt an immense respect swell in his chest. No boast, no dramatics, just competence and precision, the hallmark of someone who operated at the highest level of skill. The room's atmosphere shifted, admiration mingled with relief, and the understanding settled in that history had been made that night. Lives had been saved by a presence few could have anticipated, yet all would forever remember. Later, Hawk gathered his team for a quiet moment outside the hangar. The desert lay calm, stars piercing the night sky like distant witnesses. "Tonight," Hawk began, voice steady, "we faced the impossible. Ambushes, storms, and a battlefield that tested everything. And we survived because someone we never expected stepped in, guided us, and ensured we all made it." The SEALs nodded, silent respect heavy in the air. Hawk's gaze drifted toward the helicopter, where the pilot now prepared for her next mission. "She didn't just fly that helicopter, she carried every one of us through hell. That's skill. That's courage. That's heroism." Bolt broke the silence, voice still trembling. "I don't know if anyone can ever top that, ever." Ranger simply shook his head, understanding. Doc adjusted his gear, nodding silently. Hawk allowed a brief moment of pride to wash over him, pride in his team, and pride in the acknowledgement that extraordinary skill and courage had once again ensured survival. The pilot's actions that night would become legend within their circles, a story whispered, revered, and celebrated. Not for fame, but for the undeniable demonstration of bravery, expertise, and unshakable calm in the face of impossible odds. As dawn broke over the desert, casting golden light across the tarmac, the SEALs and their pilot stood together briefly, silent acknowledgement passing between them. Hawk approached her one final time, extending a hand. "On behalf of every man here, thank you, truly." She shook his hand briefly, her demeanor composed, her expression calm but not unkind. "Just doing my job," she replied, understated yet filled with authority. Hawk knew it was more than that. It was mastery, courage, and precision, the very qualities that had saved lives that night, and every SEAL present understood it fully. The storm, the ambush, and the desert were behind them, but the memory of the night, the skill of the pilot, and the survival of the SEALs would endure. Hawk Mercer knew that while missions came and went, some moments stayed forever, etched into memory, respected, and never forgotten. That night the desert had tested them all, and an unexpected hero had emerged, teaching lessons of trust, skill, and calm under fire. They were alive, they were safe, and they were forever changed.